So many questions. Okay.
So, we were going to talk about issues, unless there's anything else with the TSC that we want to talk about.
No, I think the issues, .9, I think we touched upon a lot of things in the community meeting itself, but I just wanted to see if we had more thoughts around the release dates and issues and a little more in the
release dates sound great, mid-January, and then 6 weeks later is the end of February.
Yes.
That's just in front of GDC. You know, if that's a .10, ideally we can figure out if that's a .10 or a 1.0. I feel like that's the .10 release might be the 1.0.
Yeah.
Especially if we get the scale, because that is when we want to
we're
use it.
And I think that
I'm mixing my meetings here a little bit, but yeah. That would be super cool. So that lines up with us. So there's the corporate side of the technical steering committee throwing emphasis on something.
I think it really depends on what the work required and the features we figure out we still need to do and everything.
Yeah,
but either going to GDC with hey Open Match is 1.0 or Open Match is going 1.0 and announcements of that sort would be awesome.
Yep. I think the one question I had, I checked with Ish as well, and I don't think he cares as much, but are you from a legal, contractual, blah, blah, blah perspective, do you have to have a 1.0 before you folks go live on it? Like Google would in future, but is that something I checked with Ish, I don't think he cared, but is it, you know what I'm asking? Do you need a 1.0 for the open
If
source?
someone wants to stand up a business on top of Open Match, they would need some, Open Match doesn't necessarily need to have all that, but they would have to be confident that they would be able to support their own SLA on Open Match.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
No, I think the question then is if let's say we shoot for all the same features in .10, would legally you want .10 to be 1.0, or you're okay calling it .10 so long as it meets your SLAs with a caveat that
I don't know if
happens
it
in
needs to be 1.0. I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any obligation there that says, hey, well, the thing has to be greater than 1 or equal to 1 in order for an SLA to exist.
Cool.
The SLA is a guarantee from the person hosting it, right?
Perfect.
So, yeah.
So
ideally it is, but it's not. That's more of a splash for us than it is for us, royal us.
No, I think I kind of the reason I ask is Agonis had. I mean, I think game servers and Agonis, if I track that, had something Google has probably more stringent requirements there, right? Where before we declared alpha for game servers, Agonis had to be 1.0 was the requirement. But anyway,
you guys also, it's part of your hosting a product. You can make the underlying components your mantra, and therefore those components need to have the same visibility.
Basically,
So anyway, for our specific needs.
Okay. Fantastic.
It's a footnote that the whole thing is even running this way, right? Most people aren't interested.
So issues. Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to pull up the notes for this meeting.
I don't know if we have this in the notes.
No, I don't think we have added any of the. We can.
I always just.
Oh no, that's fine.
Okay.
This is the one where I kind of jump in and quickly scrap the notes together. We missed. Did we miss all of November?
Yes.
That actually feels right now that I'm saying it out loud.
Yeah.
Because why on earth would we meet then? Insert break page. Okay.
So, this proposal is let's rename things, and then let's move assigned tickets. So basically, move assigned tickets to the front ends, which aligns much more closely with what the types of function or methods calls on the front end are, because they're all dealing with single tickets or small groups of tickets. And then having the back end be purely for matches and logic be purely for querying. And then rename things so that back end is match API, front end is ticket API, and logic is query API. And I go into a bunch more here, but I don't know how much we want to do that versus just talk about it. Do you have opinions?
Yeah, I'm curious to talk more about the assigned tickets move.
Okay.
From a security perspective, let's say you had identity. Let's say you had like JWT identity stuck on the front door on the ticket API.
Mhm.
It makes sense to validate the caller as a player or a service that is like wrapping this stuff.
Right.
And I guess in that context, maybe it's less of a big deal, but the director having an identity that matches with the Match API or game server identity,
Right.
you just have two actors now on the front door that you didn't have before. You had one actor.
Yeah.
So that's my only concern there.
So I guess the original motivation for
because
putting them that way is the components that were talking to them. And
the back end was the back end and the front end was the front end. So if you were coming in the front door, you were the front end.
Yeah.
If you microservicify this, then yes, the correct thing is basically that in a microservices world, things understand that the callers are from various walks of their acting lives, right? So I'm trying to think if this has any major effect. I mean, as a wrapper of all this stuff, a person using this would not necessarily struggle to, and also we don't have identities, so maybe that's cart before the horse.
Yeah.
That's a decent point, though.
Authorizing assigned tickets is especially hard. It's easy to authorize ticket because I either created the ticket or my identity matches the ticket, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or my identity matches some piece of information in the ticket.
Right.
Whereas assigned tickets is like you need to be coming from the right like claim somehow to say like you're allowed to do this. Whereas in the back door you can basically be like everything needs to have that claim, and on the front end we authorize tickets. I might have to solve it unilaterally, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I think in general, we don't want people talking to the front end, but in practice, we need to provide an actual community solution before people will not just talk to the front end.
So somebody like what Grange is doing for now, actually, this may break their use case, right? Where yes, we need a front end before the open match front end, but for their scale and for their requirements, they just don't care. They have the player directly talk to the open match front end. Now putting assigned tickets on there just makes their solution a whole lot.
Why don't putting assigned tickets there make their solution better?
Well, no,
it doesn't make better. It makes it worse because now.
Yeah, you have a good point there.
I think your identity point makes it like really scary for putting assigned tickets there in their use.
So if we're not moving assigned tickets, are we still okay with these names?
I'm okay with backend and frontend because then I think they do represent what they really are, which is who talks to them. But logic to query API still, I think, makes sense to me.
Wait, so you're not. You want to keep backend and frontend?
Yeah, if we aren't making the move, I think backend and frontend staying back in the frontend is okay, because those kind of then indicate the components or the actors that are talking to them. I mean, that was kind of the original. I guess I'm okay with them. I mean, it's not like I have. Yeah. If we aren't moving the assigned tickets, then I think it's what else can you do with them?
I don't like calling it front end because it makes it hard to talk about other front ends, and also in a sense, all three of those are front ends to Open Match. So it just doesn't feel quite like a good name. But
the issue I sort of have with Ticket API, let me talk specifically about Ticket API. It feels like the surface area that I'm going to work with the collection of tickets. So it also feels like the place where I would query tickets. It's CRUD, right? Create, read, update, delete. On
right.
API. Yeah. Whereas I think that if you were to look at this from how you would see them in production, I would imagine there being like 8 ticket APIs, 3 query APIs, and 2 reliable match APIs. The reason for that is because the ticket API is actually the front end scaling component that is the runtime critical piece to players getting into consideration.
Sure.
And that's where I think things are more comfortable in the front end space, because when you read it in the environment, it's very clean. The front end is the thing that's like, we need tens of them. That's the scaling front door. But at the same time, and this is the other problem, it is not the front door. It's the front door for Open Match.
Yes.
Starly, you're relatively new to the space. We're all tainted with our opinions about interacting with Open Match. Do you have any opinions on what these services are called? You don't. You can. Let's say your opinion is as strong as you want to say it is. It doesn't have to be like final.
No, I'm not. Like, the current names are fine for me. I feel. Like, when going through the code base and like trying to understand the full architecture of the system, like they made sense to me about like what purpose and what task they were specifically doing. So I think they're good.
Is there, building on what Starly's saying, is there anything, because it makes sense today, let's say we moved a sign, let's just pretend like suddenly everything's collection oriented. Is there any API that we imagine shipping around like stats or config that suddenly don't fit?
That's a good point.
You know, if I want to manage indexes, is there an index API? Let's say everything isn't just Kubernetes configured. If it is, it changes things, but
Right.
And I imagine I get stats from the query API. Probably makes sense.
Probably.
Yeah. Is there anything related to Match API? Match is the thing that schedules functions. That's the back end, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What if we go to a world where we promote function context, like functions into this? You know, not the hosting, but I'm going to register a function somewhere. Do I register that with the Match API?
I would think that's a separate service at that point.
Sure.
It again totally depends on what we are. So that's why I think it's just not renaming, right? It's what exactly do those mean? And I think that's kind of what you alluded to. At some point, it's like, how do they scale? What do they mean? So are they, the suggestions on the right are all making them very specific to collections, but I think that has concerns around, so in the example that you're mentioning, let's speak of function, right? I think
Oh yeah, I did break it out here actually.
the scaling characteristics of something that needs to register a function or like essentially be a control plane for functions is very different from both the entities that are present.
for sure.
And the actors who talk to it will be very different, because at that point, the entity interacting with that would ideally be your DevOps or not so much your director. A director isn't going to register, or that's not a runtime, basically. That's a control plane. Like this becomes, these are the data plane APIs, and that essentially becomes like control plane API at that point, is what
Yes.
I guess you had a good point about the security bit, but on the other flip side here, when I was looking at like, why do we have these as separate services, like separate binaries that are running instead of just like one big deployment and service? I mean, maybe we should be going that way, but it seems that the backend or Match API is doing long-lived like MF type stuff where like there's a lot of data flowing through it, so like it shouldn't be handling other stuff. You don't want to bog it down with trading tickets, because it's going to be doing like this bulk processing of calling out to match functions and then streaming them back to the synchronizer and then streaming them out to the director. And the ticket API has, or the front end currently, and then assigned tickets also has this behavior of like, it's just like short-lived, like, I'm gonna call Redis really quick, do some modification, and then return some results. I guess the exception to that is the stream assignments.
Yeah, but that I think is a separate discussion as to whether we should even just deprecate that thing. But
That's tricky. And then lastly, it does feel right that the querying the tickets should be its own service, just because there's lots of opportunity for optimization and caching within it.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to be something that's more distinct from like the kinds of operations that you're doing are very different with it.
What is, where do I create tickets? That's in the tickets API.
Yeah.
Does it has a connection to the Redis database?
Yes.
Okay.
Everything does.
Yeah, well, that's all of my question is.
Yeah. Everything talks to Redis basically.
I originally kind of thought that Logic would become a data API.
You can call it a data or a query, but I think that's what it is, right?
Well, I imagine that Front Door and Match wouldn't know about Redis.
Oh, so everything just kind of plumps through.
Oh, okay. Which is where like I understand why it's called query now.
Sure.
And that's why I didn't call ticket.
So in that world, the front end would talk to the data API to actually inject stuff into Redis.
Yeah, but maybe that seems unnecessary. But in terms of services with backing databases, you got 3 services talking to the same database, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's reasons not to do that. At the same time, it's okay. It doesn't bother me necessarily, right? But I now understand more about why it's called query. I think query API, query server, however you want to add the suffix, that one seems phenomenal.
Okay.
+1.
Yeah, for sure. Back end versus front end. Man, I don't really have a model for helping. If you have a strong opinion about it, I don't know.
I actually, from this discussion, I think I'm leaning towards just keeping it
Back
the
end.
way it is, just because I think both the identity of the actors as well as the scaling characteristics make. I mean, there are 2 separate things, right? The name and the stuff that's on it, like moving the assign here. I think from the latter, what we have currently makes sense, because even though assign is on assigned tickets, the API itself only scales with the number of matches, because you call and assign on a match. That's the pattern that we expect.
And you can also change assign tickets to
Single ticket.
have a match nomenclature too.
Yeah,
You can say assign match, and a match is a list of tickets, right? Like you just pass the ticket object with assignments.
Actually, that might be another interesting one, because today we have like a weird all or none. Like we basically have to anyways enforce that when it's like it's either all or none internally. But anyways, but yeah, I think I +1 on that. I think query Logic to query service for sure. I think the front end to back end, front end and back end, I don't think we have enough evidence to make that change. So we can possibly keep it like that unless in .10 timeframe we think of strong reasons to change it.
Well, I tried. Can at least get rid of the weird name that is Logic.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my goodness.
100%, because I think that one's so naturally weird that even when I was making this mock for presentations and whatnot for the 5-minute talk,
No one does an Logic.
yeah, like I'm replacing it, or I'm like putting it in a bracket Logic with query or data API, and it's like, yeah, that clearly means it should change. But
Okay.
We currently have our implementation of, we call our database iTicket data right now, but we need to break it up. We call it, we have 3 things. Assign tickets is the last one that because we accidentally ended up mocking the entire interface. We now need to break that down to match this. So, yeah, assign tickets will be its own thing for the back end. If that were called something else, it would still be fine. If the assigned tickets API were called something else, it'd be fine. I mean,
so that's that, yeah.
Cool.
So today, by the way I think the Redis connection works is we have an internal state store component that each of these load, and eventually in future, like let's assume we have to change stuff, then we can go one of 2 ways, right? Which is either have the data API be the central place, or at least have that as a service then, where that becomes like essentially if you just want to replace Redis, your changes don't bleed through to every component. It's like you swap out a service. And that's the motivation to have a separate service, so to say, that handles that. Today, we already have that abstraction as a separate library, but yeah.
It's a leaky abstraction though, so
Is
I don't
it?
like.
Does Redis kind of flow into?
No, not Redis, but some assumptions about like how the database operates, I feel.
Has managed to get around.
I mean, this is kind of true of like everybody always wants to write a nice wrapper around their database so they can change your database. And
It's super easy. It just has like create and read and update and delete and well, the list is weird though, because the list you need to know about the things.
right, yeah, exactly. So it's,
Yeah. So we'll make an operation abstraction to understand how that works for whatever database.
And-
And you only ever ship with one database, right? Like maybe you swap. I actually have an issue that we just hit yesterday that's not in here because I wanted to talk to you guys about it real fast, then we'll add it.
okay.
If I do a delete ticket in between a signed ticket being called, like if I call a signed ticket on a ticket that doesn't exist anymore, what happens, you think?
If you call assign on a ticket that doesn't exist anymore,
Yeah.
it should fail.
If I had to guess,
Mhm.
it creates a ticket that only has the assignment on it.
Yeah, that's probably what happens. That's what ours does also. So,
Sign tickets on.
because all it does
tickets
is a
create
hash
the ticket?
write. It doesn't verify that the thing exists.
Well, ours does a read. I don't know what I'd have to look at the code, but probably not good things.
Probably not good.
Wait,
Yeah.
assign creates a ticket?
So I make a ticket,
Okay, okay.
and then it gets through matchmaking, and the director has pulled it off.
Sure.
And it's been marked by the evaluator or whatever the synchronizer
Uh-huh.
is as like awaiting
Oh,
assignment. I don't think you
sure.
guys have that actually.
Yeah,
in
no, we do.
assignment.
We do.
Cool. And then I'm like, I actually don't want to matchmake, so I delete my ticket. The director will come back along and say, assign tickets. Here's my assignment information. Here's my ticket IDs. What our system does is it does a hash write to effectively like the ticket now exists again.
Sure.
And it just has an assignment, but like it creates like a lot of exceptions for something that we do. I'm
I
just
would
wondering if
be-
you guys had that problem also.
I would be surprised if it creates it. I think that assignment would fail. But we should follow
Where's
it up.
the-
I think that assignment fails if the ticket doesn't exist. So
it directly calls create ticket though. So hold on, let me find.
wait, what? Assign?
Yeah. Filter, update assignment. There we go. So we get a connection.
There's a failed ticket ticket from Redis one.
Oh wait, sanity check to make sure
Yeah.
all the tickets are valid.
Fail?
So
Yep.
we do a get ticket.
Yep.
Um,
Should fail right
I
now.
can't wait to stress test this.
Cool.
I think we're incidentally, by way of not doing too much, on the optimized side.
Mhm.
And we actually like did a bunch of serialization optimizations around when we read and write and do transactions. So I think we're going to be close. But yeah, we can certainly go in and try to help on the database side, especially because I think we incidentally, as part of having our own implementation, like created some of our own problems there, right?
But
So actually, if the ticket's deleted right here, which it's a narrow
Race
race
condition.
condition.
You don't
But it's
have
race
a
condition.
transaction
Yeah,
context, right?
So we read it, we have the
sure,
ticket.
then it'll create one.
Have you
yes.
guys used any transactions? Any Redis database scope transactions?
And it's kind of here, but like
I don't think exactly.
that's not a.
Because it has a concept of like scheduling a bunch of commands and then making them a forced.
Yeah,
synchronous.
yeah.
Oh yeah, this is
It basically
multi.
creates multi.
Multi.
Okay, so you guys
Yeah,
have
that's what we're using.
possibly a couple multis. Okay.
But
Necessary in some places, a weird amount of stress overhead in others. So
okay.
we don't know how to profile this stuff. So we might get back on the Slack threads and the dev channels and maybe start profiling when we get to that point. Maybe we can get a shared matchmaker stood up or something.
Question. How do you? What should be the recommended assignment flow story? Like while we are thinking of where assignments should live, because right now I think the problem is streaming assignments is not a great idea. So let's drop that. Front end should call get in a loop, which is okay.
Yeah.
Except, do we really think that's how it should be?
The thing is like just adding some context here from the way that I've seen it done, and also the way like we're thinking about it, the way I know people. That is a whole other piece of infrastructure to do the game connection.
Mhm.
If you wanted to stand up notify pipes or like some type of push pipe or something like that,
Sure.
we can create an extension here to understand how that might work.
Yeah.
I'm not even talking about the player, like the game connection to the player.
Okay.
What I'm saying is you have your game front end, which is at this point the get assignment is being done from your game front end. I'm assuming, not from the player, right? Into open match.
Yes.
Make sense?
Uh-huh.
What I'm saying is your director is doing the assigned tickets back in. We're using open match as a channel to just pass that assignment through.
Yeah.
Could your director potentially just talk to your game front end and be like, by the way,
Yeah.
here's the assignment for this ticket? I mean,
Yeah. Maybe we just remove assignment from open match.
Oh.
if potentially
Can
assignment
just make
wasn't
it
there.
delete ticket.
Yeah. I mean.
So the onus is on the caller then to delete a ticket once they have communicated the right assignment, right? I mean, at that point, open matches, I mean, just hypothetically, but at that point, open match is like, everything that needs a match gets in here. Sure, we get out matches from the back end. And once you know you have a match, just delete the thing that was waiting. Like, why have this?
We definitely need something in the ecosystem to get that a component that people can use to do this before we can remove it from open match core.
My hesitation is I feel like we actually need a substantial solution if we want to, because right now open match is very similar to a database. You know, you write things in and then you schedule like a query that's going to result in things being updated on tables, right? And so to that degree, it's very approachable this way. If you turn it into a pipeline delegator, right, which is more like I put work in the front and I'm going to hook up a listener on the back end and I'm going to listen for changes. I think you have to take an approach to the listener. I'm not sure an ecosystem. I agree. It could start as an ecosystem thing, and then maybe it graduates, and we delete this code in order to have the other code.
I mean,
feel like that's a good approach.
My only concern would be, and again, I think the scale tests would educate a decision here, is this is the only place where
Those are
we're actually
polling, yeah.
actually updating the database again, right? If assign wasn't present, then it's all just create a ticket and query. That's it.
No, you would need to resolve the ticket. Yeah, because otherwise, how do you know when the ticket is done? Like, for example.
Setting the
Because
ticket
it's still
as like.
waiting for assignments.
You need to
basically
update
need to
that
go
bit
through
on
and
the-
say like, hey, by the way, this ticket's now like dead. We're gonna go offload it.
And we also don't have a proposal, but we've been thinking about, we probably need a way to say,
TTLs.
actually, well, no, there is a time to live of like a minute.
Yeah, actually, we have this problem too. Allocation failures or like director failures that basically says like, hey, actually, this ticket's not awaiting for an assignment. It's available.
We need to go back and forth. We don't have a proposal, but we probably should add that.
Okay, so hang on, let me make a new proposals to make. Delete ticket while waiting for assignment ticket throw. So it sounds like you guys maybe don't have that problem.
Yeah.
But I'll make a thing. Ticket back into pool after director
Sorry, what was
fails
the first
to
one?
do something with it. The first one is delete ticket while waiting for assignment.
Oh, yeah, well, there's a
You
very
think-
small bug in our code now and I'm looking at it, so yes.
Oh, the ticket back in the pool. I had a
As
question.
a race condition.
Race condition.
And then you can prioritize it how you want. Ticket back into pool after director fails to do something with.
So
and then we want
about that, I actually had another thought. Thank God, I made a note the other day to myself to discuss this, so it's good. The whole alpha testing that we've kind of discussed in past, right, where it's like, sure, you have a match function, but now you also want to test another match function to see what output gets generated by it, but you really don't want those matches like to be real matches. I mean, there are two ways you could do it, right? Your match function itself could do the necessary. So let's assume you have a fake function, which not fake function, but you have a function that you don't want to generate the real matches with, but you're just testing this out in production. So one way you do it is send requests for that function, but that function doesn't actually return any proposals back to OpenMatch at all. It does whatever it needs to do to your logging system. The other approach is
totally third party. Okay.
Yes, and the other approach is OpenMatch provides you with, so this whole awaiting assignment bit, OpenMatch essentially lets your fetch matches say that this is, by the way, don't mark this as awaiting assignments at all. So at that point, it's almost like that function would participate in the same cycle. It would generate matches, but your evaluator can choose to just ignore collisions
So
like that because you know you're not gonna.
I think there's a third option here, which is OpenMatch has a log of all the tickets that are being added and deleted.
Mhm.
And you are able to take that or like get a snapshot out of it and say like, so I can not run my test code in production, which is a good thing, but also I can like run it on like a snapshot of player data.
That's always the no, I think that's a separate scenario though, right? I mean, having a snapshot of data and feeding it into a non-production environment is great. What I'm curious is, would you ever want to support a case of, it's not a test code in production. Let's say your function is ready. But before you flip the bit, do you want it to essentially be like, I want to run this, see what matches get generated, but I'm not confident enough to drop the results. And I think from OpenMatch core perspective, there is a scenario and there are ways to do it. From core perspective, what it boils down to is, do we need a way to say, do not mark this ticket as an assignment?
I have some ideas.
Sure.
Third-party approach, we don't care.
Okay. Yes.
First-party approach, hey, like first party is in, it's or second party. Let's say second party. It's not explicitly like a scenario that we're supporting, but because we've added an API for putting the ticket back into the pool, the director could technically constantly be mudging, but it has an effect on matchmaking. So I think there's a focus here to not let it affect matchmaking. So pretend with me, for example, it really comes down to the evaluator needs to, I lost it.
The evaluator needs to drop the matches.
Yeah, it needs to ignore certain results based off of.
Yeah. It's going to build a secondary list, right? Like a A-B list. So the A list is the real list, and the B list is like a second run of the whole thing, but doesn't solidify the results, right? And so like, how does the director say, hey, run this, but also my evaluator, this is a category stage run or category red run or something like that. And it still gets results back. I mean, I think the idea is that you're still getting stats or results for the purposes of like the snapshotting, sort of.
Sure.
That seems like the right place for it to live. Whether or not there's a first party construct, I think is
So yes, the evaluator can still always choose to like get, so whether you do it in the match.
The evaluator has just a shit ton of matches in it.
Yeah.
And some of them need to exist and some of them don't need to exist. It could technically like rebalance them, but like.
Again, I think that's I still feel like that's third party though, based on who you think writes the evaluator.
Yeah, yes.
Instance, like from OpenMatch core perspective, that's identical to MMF dropping the matches.
But so
it's
you could call the evaluator twice. One with all of the matches you actually care about, and one with your matches you care about and your test matches. But like, I'm not seeing the like strong use of why do you need to do this in production, this kind of scary thing in production,
I think
versus
well,
wouldn't you much rather have
the
player
scarier thing with production is I've rewritten a match function and I've tested it on a replay, but now I'm going to do a rolling update, zero downtime deployment, and now it's just live, and it either is or isn't doing the thing I thought it was going to do. And you almost want a totally separate stream for it that's not going to affect production, but arguably you could imagine this being similar.
Yeah.
You mentioned today you have a API in your own implementation to put the ticket back into the pool from the director.
Like
No.
You don't. Would you need that? I mean, that's another. I mean,
We need that. Yeah, if you guys had that, that would be something we don't have. That would be really nice.
So then the question is this better or that? I mean,
if you have replay,
let me just.
then
There's a couple of things.
Yeah. It's a different scenario, but
Tickets go in. You guys on the thing can't see me, but I'll describe it. I'm drawing a bunch of lines of tickets going into a front door, that then go into a database. Oh man, database. Soup can. I've got a bunch of functions up here that are doing queries, and let's just say some more than others. And then I have a backend, and then I have this big thing called an evaluator. This is the thing that schedules those three, gets back the results, and then eventually sends a big chunk of these into the evaluator. In the evaluator, we have one synchronizing context.
yes.
There's one of them.
Yep.
And so even if you have a concept that I understand as being partitions, I don't get them.
Yes.
And so, partitions could possibly mean multiple synchronizers.
Sure.
You could also have categories of the results that I would like to run different. I don't know. Basically, what I'm trying to say is there might be a first party understanding of like the contracts of the evaluator for the purposes of possibly, unlike functions where we didn't ship a harness, it might make sense to have more information that we're understanding from an open match perspective that actually gives people value. This is an execute method. Anything more than that restricts the game logic and performance. This is the synchronizing nature of this seems critical.
Yeah. But I think just one more block there, right? Because when we speak of open match core, and I think that's where the synchronizer and evaluator, I think by now, in my mental model, those are two separate terminologies, right? So I think it's almost like your evaluator is a separate block, which...
Sorry, the synchronizer is actually in here.
Yes,
right.
Let's put that in.
So partitions would also need to be here.
Yeah.
Which we don't have.
Which we don't have today, but I think...
Right. And then categories and stuff like that might be...
something that you care about, which is...
Might be something we don't care about.
Yeah.
But the contract shared here is something we care about.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
ideally, it's useful going in and flexible going out, right?
Sure.
So to the point of how do I turn something on and not mess with it, I think if we had the ability to roll back the results, that is less useful, but allows us to at least make progress.
Okay.
Ideally, we're able to put match functions in that we would know their evaluation score,
Sure.
but then wouldn't necessarily mint the results, and also wouldn't affect tickets being pulled out of the pool only to be put back in the pool.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? The goal is for our evaluator to actually see how that function compares.
Sure.
And so if we can't use the evaluator or the evaluator affects performance because it actually changes the state of the pool, that's unfortunate.
So I think in that case, this solution works, right? So if, from my perspective, this is your third party, this is third party stuff, right? Like when
He's drawing red boxes around the black box.
So I would almost say now that
It is on camera a little bit, you just can't
Okay.
see it.
it's probably not. So let's assume you have one is your production match function and one is your test match function. And both of these act on the same pool in the same cycle, generate the same set of results. Comes in here, you have something in your extension marked which your evaluator now understands. By the way, this match was generated by a test match function, just to be ignored. It does its own, whatever your analytics pipeline is, it informs it, but when it comes back to the synchronizer, it completely, that result is just dropped.
So, but do I have the ability to know that does the contracts in the evaluator currently, does this contract currently support labeling of function runs, or is that something I have to bake into my
You have to bake into your
evaluator extension?
So that's what I'm saying. So today, there is one solution.
If you have live replay, you don't need any of this anyways, because if you still want to do like I want to do a rollout test, you can do a rollout test on a test environment with the live replay.
Sure.
So you're still not actually affecting production, and you're not risking touching production and blowing up production.
I think let's separate the scenario from there is the live replay. There is the ability to would you provide? I mean,
Well, I'm trying to figure out the problem that you're trying to solve,
Sure.
and in the problems that you stated, it seems that live replay is always safer anyways because you're not touching production, and there's no chance of it ever affecting production. Whereas all of these methods are kind of trying to figure out a way to do something in production without it actually touching production.
So you think there is never going to be a case where you want a match function to generate results that we can possibly have an option of toss these results away?
Not when you can replay the same data in a test environment.
So the replay is critically important for big customers who are training their match function algorithms. Yeah, absolutely. When they go to roll it out, the big thing they want is they want the ability to do a mix. So they'll deploy it, get it live, no traffic. then they'll send 10% of the traffic to it,
Mhm.
and they'll send 100% of the traffic to it and let it scale up.
Right.
So that type of mix, that rolling update, you need something like that supported anyways.
So in absence of us supporting it, your director will have to be smart enough to then start doing that A/B stuff, right? Where it's more like you could still say your directors are configured to all say use function A and not B, and then eventually say that.
yeah.
Or your director is
Yeah.
dumb and says sure no, but it's a configuration where I'll both. And
Or you can do it at a Kubernetes level.
I think we have everything we need with the exception, I think we could get the ticket replay stuff from OpenMatch specifically. Like OpenMatch could have the log of the tickets and maybe even the queries, right? Whatever was executed.
Mhm.
That would get you 90% of a replay, right? Yeah.
Joseph had a proposal on that.
Yeah. I mean, that was something that was there from the beginning.
Yeah.
You make it ins and outs, then you get replay, then you get machine learning, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
We should keep moving, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, is there much more?
Yes, there is.
Okay.
I mean, we should just go over the issues.
Yeah, well, this one, I don't know if you have opinions, but we're thinking of reducing down to one gRPC and HTTP port because we have a whole bunch of ports for a bunch of different things, and we don't need them. We could just have one port for each endpoint.
Okay.
Theoretically, you can put them on the same port, but I feel like that's...
So the liveness will also be on the HTTP port, and metrics will be on the HTTP port.
I'm not sure
Okay.
about that.
Some of those ports are metrics and one is liveness.
Right,
I don't know if you guys
but-
have liveness set up, but we're gonna probably add liveness.
Yeah, we have
liveness, yes.
The thing we kind of want to do with this though is like instead of having to like look up the port numbers for the front end, the back end, whatever have you, you just have the port numbers like it's just one set port so that all of the configuration about like what ports are open on the OpenMatch services and all of that all like simplifies down to this is a gRPC port, this is HTTP.
Yeah, great.
Maybe a liveness port and a metrics port too,
Okay.
something like that.
I see. Yeah.
That one, let's get back to that if we have time. This one, assignment.error should be assignment.status. So the type of the error, I didn't.
Is status. So
Is
you wanna
a
rename it
gRPC status and it has a code of okay.
Yeah. I mean, in general, we actually have quite a bit of problem with status in general. It's not robust enough to do error handling around things like validation, where I've got lots of errors and lots of messages to provide the user. It currently has a string and a code, and the code isn't defined, right? There's no detail links. It's a pretty thin status concept.
Is it?
But do we have, I think we did have a string in here as well.
Yeah, it's a string and a code.
Yeah.
A string and an int or something like
Sure,
that.
yeah.
And I think there's any detail,
Yeah.
possibly. Maybe we just don't have that one implemented.
The assignment had an extension as well, right? Or did
Hold
we?
on, I'm trying to find protobuf.
But the assignment error didn't used to be a status type. The assignment error was a nice object for the developers to fill in.
Yeah, so it has the code, it has a message, and it has a details.
And is this what we're using for assignment error, is status?
I believe so. This is google.grpc. Let me go look at. I'm 90% sure it is. This is a message.
I bet that's what we're using.
Yes, Google gRPC status error. Yeah, so yeah, the point being, let's put if they don't put a status on here, we should probably put a status of okay. And we should call it status. Because otherwise, like, there's some like weird behavior of like if a client's checking that I don't have an error, the error field is not set, but it is set with a status of okay. Like, what is the you're getting weird interaction there.
Sure.
So if we just always set it and say like if you don't set it, we're gonna set it for you because we think it should be set, and we're going to say it's okay.
So my assignment, which is now never null, or is
Or
not.
Assignment could be null.
or the assignment will have, this will be status instead of error.
So assignment has connection and status and extensions.
Yes.
I think the current proposal is just to rename the error to status.
Yes.
Which,
Yeah.
so I think what you're hinting to is like, assuming the status field stays status, I think that proposal totally makes sense. Now, whether that field itself, is that what you're questioning as to?
Are you questioning the type in general?
Yeah, part of it's the type. Part of it is status. I'm not sure how, like, when status got added as the assignments. I mean, we disconnected from this a little bit on this specific field. It does model the original ask, but I think the original request was it
Just a
into
string?
the string, which I think looked like status. So we made it status, so now it inherits all of the type language of status, which it is not.
Yeah.
It's not a request. It's an assignment.
Sure.
Right. It's not a request concept. It's not a Google RPC status. Not really. It's really some type of assignment status
Yeah.
Okay.
or assignment error. And so, yes, proposal to rename status. Good. Other issue.
Do we want?
Status type is odd.
I have a feeling like I vaguely remember at some point Jeremy was like this because it was named status and was a string. And then the thing was like, hey, I mean, or it was named error and was a string, and error shouldn't really be a string, so he had replaced that. But I see what you're saying. In the original proposal, this was just a string being returned.
I think it was just a string. At the time, that was back when we were also doing JObject errors.
Yeah.
So we were doing JSON errors, right? Now it's like I think we can agree there's a common way to do an assignment error that like exposes enough fields for a developer in OpenMatch to say like a code, a string, or possibly an array of code, a string. I think code and string is probably substantial. Code string any probably also is fine. It's just code string any sounds great, but the fact that it looks like a status from an RPC library is coincidental.
Yeah. Sure, that makes sense.
Assignment.
So I don't, the thing about having a code that's not like, I guess you didn't say what I was saying, but
Could also be an any.
Any or a string, right? Sorry.
The problem with making it like an int or a string is that suddenly you have two different systems that can set an error on an assignment, right? It can be your director or it could be your allocator, for example. Like there's some combination of systems that can give back an error on an assignment.
Yeah. So someone owns calling give these tickets an error assignment though.
It
So that's-
does, but you might want to be able to like have it flow through. So like now, I guess the point being that if you have to reconcile like what error codes, or like if I'm looking at strings, I've written this code before. It's not pretty. Of like I have two different things that can put error messages on. I have to write code to figure out which one set the error message and then interpret the error message.
I mean, at the end of the day, the edge unit there needs to interpret the other units.
Yes.
It's especially challenging if you want to host matchmakers on OpenMatch, because the errors are also definable by the user.
Maybe we just say you put various error types on extensions and call it a day.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
So just have a string called error on the extension.
No. Yeah,
He's saying
like,
just leave it as extensions.
Yeah, that's so.
yeah.
Like you're using it with
Oh.
with an any which has a name error potentially.
Like if you know.
I mean, it's less useful for us because we use the error and we also expose the error concept to developers.
You do.
So that's from
Okay.
us perspective. As someone who hosts this, like I think the fields as they're currently situated actually make a lot of sense. For someone who is hosting matchmakers.
But you don't want.
I think that's the
RPC
right.
status or RPC status.
It's not an RPC object. I guess it is, but this is where gRPC and the way we do things always confuses me. The data models are the contract models. they're also the things we write into the Redis database. Like I sort of don't know. I need guidance on it. Is the idea that like every time we're going to do something that has the word error on it, we should be instead doing a status that has an int and a string and a details any?
I think
it might be correct for this case, but I don't have the clarity to help.
Yeah.
So it looks weird to me. That's my call out. Is,
Okay, so maybe some thought to be considered. Okay, we'll move on. Have evaluator only return match IDs. The idea here is that we are streaming an entire object from the backend to the synchronizer to the evaluator, and all three of those know the whole object, but we're streaming the whole object back anyways. Do we want to just say you return the match ID and the evaluator will return that to the correct backend, and the backend instance goes, okay, like I already have the data blob.
Yeah.
I'll send it
if
back.
we were to formalize this, I think I would say that the objects, the proposals that you pass to, if we wanted to say the evaluator can't mutate the matches,
Yes.
fine. But then we need a field that can be returned along with the match ID that is like the evaluator results or metadata that the evaluator noticed about the match,
So
or
you-
the score.
You
We
are
actually
really
mutate
useful
matches?
thing.
You actually mutate the matches?
We don't mutate them. We've heard of people who want to mutate them. I'm not
evaluator.
really keen. Yeah, they want to do things like balance the teams at that point. We've kind of told them that's not really.
Oh.
It's not really a useful computational model.
Sure.
Like, you should do that ahead of time.
Yeah.
Other people like other games I've seen actually use evaluator more similar to functions, where they actually like do simulation at that point, where they actually determine which team's going to win and if it's close enough to be good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think
that logic definitely feels like it should be in the MMF.
yeah, for sure.
But-
We're in agreement there.
There is one use case where I'm kind of like, maybe the evaluator needs to be mutating stuff, which is, say you have a battle royale game, you have 100 players in this match, 100 players in this match returned by different MMFs, and they share one player, right?
Mhm.
Like, the correct thing to do is probably just
Evaluator needs to be pretty smart, right?
just drop one of the players
Mhm.
or drop the player from one of the matches and return both matches, because nobody's going to care that there's 99 players instead of 100. But even then, like,
If we
I
were
don't
to do
know.
that, I think today, I don't know if OpenMatch, I mean, we need to go make sure that OpenMatch synchronizer code understands that evaluator can mutate it. Because today, I think this was just an oversight. I mean, synchronizer already
Oh, you
has
don't think
all
it
the
does
matches.
this?
Yeah. I don't think it was intentional that the evaluator returns the whole matches considering mutation. And if it does, then we need to go scrub our code and have a test to actually.
we should clarify the data model one way or another.
Yeah.
Of like either mutating matches in the evaluator is allowed, or
in which
it
case we need
isn't,
to validate it.
and we can just return IDs because that's
Absolutely.
way less data flowing through the system.
Yeah, we don't have an explicit requirement that you be able to mutate it. But I would ask that we give us a chance to think about whether or not there'd be additional context we'd want to provide as a return, like the
Okay.
score.
Okay.
So I'm going to
Match
assign this
type of thing,
to
you? If the evaluator is going to say why it became a match over another one, or why it didn't become a match might be interesting, right? And you could say, let this, you're hosting the evaluator, like offload that. But at the same time, like simply
way-
tacking on a metadata object and letting that flow back to the director allows the director to calculate stats without needing a stat system.
Why it didn't become a match? That worries me, because today the expectation is the evaluator doesn't return anything that doesn't become a match, right? Everything returned by the evaluator today is treated as.
Oh, like it
Gospel
just
truth, yeah.
drops. Okay, interesting. I don't have any formal requirements for that, so.
Okay.
I've assigned this to you. You can assign
Don't
it
grin
to
at me when
further
you say
your-
that. I'm perfectly capable of doing it. I'm sure I could find the time.
Oh, no, I don't think.
like
Just for the.
like
Clarification.
not implementing it, just
No. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand what he meant, and I stand by what I said. Starly's laughing. Starly's like, Caleb can't do this.
Between you or Starly, if you guys could figure out
That's a good idea.
what's going on.
Okay.
Or you could get your boss or your CEO involved too. I don't care. Just within Unity.
Sure.
Okay. We're not going to cover that. This one, I think we already talked. Did we talk about this
Last time.
Yeah.
And then what was the other one? Oh,
The only one I would want to revisit is, yes, this one. And today, I think this is more of a correctness thing today. So today what happens is the way the synchronizer is written, it uses the match IDs. So it sends a whole bunch of matches to the evaluator, gets stuff back, and then the stuff that's returned, like for the evaluator, let me put it this way. The synchronizer has a map of like, okay, I've called the evaluator with all of these match IDs, but there was a fetch match request that each of these belong to, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you have 2 requests coming into the system.
Yeah, we actually
One.
map these back.
Yes, you have to. There is 1 request and 2 requests parallelly. The way the synchronizer today works is request 1 has match ID 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and request 2 has 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Club all the 1 to 10, give it to the evaluator, and the evaluator returns like 4, 5, 7, 9 other results. We need to now say, oh, by the way, for fetch matches 1, your results are 4 and 5, and fetch matches. Now what happens? The problem is we nowhere enforce that match IDs are unique. We today let your match functions generate them.
Mhm.
If there is a simple oversight,
Match ID.
yeah.
Match ID.
If your match function says, here are all the matches without any match ID in it, just our synchronizer would completely go for a toss in that mapping.
Yeah. So I think I kind of posted 2 things of like, we should like define the correct behavior and like force the users to do it, which is either you can't set the match ID and we set it for you, so we know it's going to be unique, or we require you to set an ID, and if we find out that it's not unique,
The
you're
system is
gonna
going to
get
misbehave, yeah.
Open Match should set the ID.
What?
Open Match should set the ID.
You should think it should?
Do you think it shouldn't?
So
I think it should.
The one caveat with that
Uh-huh.
is that you can't trace it from your match function then.
So I think it should be both.
If your match function is logging, I caught these players, I made this
Correlation
match.
is also another thing, but I like the train of thought.
I think it should be both. Now, how far we go with it and how crazy we go with it is, so for example, in the GCP's API surface, right? We always have the ID that the user sets different from the internal ID. So potentially we could go totally crazy and be like, there's an internal match proto where you give us something.
It's like a match name versus a match ID.
Basically, right? But the match ID never even gets exposed to you because that's an internal proto. We use it, but before we return things back from the back pipeline, we toss it out because you don't care about it.
Well, the evaluator needs to know the ID.
No. So evaluator doesn't care, right? Evaluator doesn't need to know any uniqueness for the match ID.
It does if we only return the ID. I guess this kind of goes back to the other one.
Yeah, sure. Anyway, I think let's keep it simple. Have a name and ID. We give you a chance for correlation by you specify the name coming into the match.
Yeah.
We set the ID, which is a UID. So your evaluator knows both. It can correlate,
Yeah.
but basically we allow you to set a name and we set an ID. I think that's a fairly standard pattern.
So I really like the name concept because I think we actually have a pretty, like I think most people have like, they'll want to name these and they'll be like, like this is my simple one. You know, some people will choose to use the function name with a number. Some people will choose to use whatever mode they're supporting with a number.
And practically today, when I debug stuff, I actually use logs from the match name dumped in the match function log to what the director sees out, right? So name is the only thing which actually will exist both places because the ID will be set only after the match gets into the open match. So I think name and ID is okay.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Yeah, name and ID feels good. The synchronizer would operate on
ID.
ID.
So name is not required to be unique then?
Yeah. I mean, synchronizer doesn't care. It's a blob for you to have your traceability.
Okay. And then ID is set by the backend. And if we go with the proposal to just stream back not the full match object, and you can't modify it in the evaluator, then are you returning the ID?
Yes.
Okay.
So the match will have the ID on it for the return as well.
Yes.
Okay.
So
that
the
would be
ID will be
useful.
visible,
We can at least align it with the synchronizing context as well.
Yeah.
and name will be
For the
optional.
evaluator.
Name is optional at that point, right? Because name is basically a field that you have to kind of, if you want to generate something from the match function and push it in, that's fine. The ID is something we.
Okay, and then there's no constraints on your name, so you don't have to make it.
Does any of this get passed to the match function?
Not the ID, because that's, not the ID. You remember in .4, because we don't even know if you'll generate anything, right? In .4, you used to this real craziness, which is a combination, like a weird mutation of all these ideas, which is like, we give you a unique prefix, essentially.
Yeah, no.
And like-
The thing is having the ID passed to the match function as some type of correlation ID. Like, then I'm struggling with the name a little bit because I need to be able to tell you what the ID is so I can track it at the beginning.
So we have
It could be like,
So
match
nothing
profile
prevents you
here.
from setting a unique name.
I know, but now there's two things, and the one that is actually the correlation ID is not the name.
No, but that's why I'm saying. So I think that's comes back to the model for GCP, right? Like, think about it like if in an ideal world, I almost feel like your correlation is your name. You can set it to unique. And the ID is only for the purposes of correctness. We need to have a unique identifier for each name. And that's why we internally set it as an ID. The tricky part though is the evaluator. Yeah, it's a synchronizer ID, right?
But it's not the evaluator ID.
That's the tricky part, where the evaluator has to then, if we go with the model of the evaluator returning IDs, that's a problem. If we don't, it doesn't matter. Because at that point, the ID is already embedded. The evaluator doesn't care.
So we do have match profile, match function on a match, which I don't think OpenMatch sets today, but it probably should because we know.
Yeah.
So we should be doing this for you, and you shouldn't be setting it.
The match
But
profile and the match ID.
no, the match function and the match profile.
Well,
This
the
is-
match
this is-
ID and the match profile. The match function is actually the place I'm sending this, right?
No, this is the match profile. This is the match.
Okay.
So on the match, there's a string for match
Oh.
profile.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, we created these just as identifiers, like, hey, which match function generated this, which match profile, and again,
But then again, like when you're logging it, you might want to just see these values. So
Let's, as part of this proposal, because I feel like it's actually like a couple things.
right.
If we just knew the life cycle of some of these pseudo foreign keys
Mhm.
and how they were made, or when we think they should get made, 'cause I don't think they're being populated today.
No,
No,
I think
none
this
of-
is just a
today none of this is populated.
Yeah.
Everything is expected to be filled from the match function.
Okay, let's understand how to fill everything. And if at the end of the day, we're like, even after racking our brains, we don't understand where this comes from, then we figure out if it's promotable to the in contract or if it's useful for like the person integrating with it to set it. Because then if it is, like, it becomes correlation information. Because right now it's not clear to me how I correlate the evaluator, the match function, and the director.
Mhm.
yes.
Which we suffer from this in our system because the match function logs are just like, they have no idea in the context under which they're called. They just get a query, and we don't have a way of combining them.
So
By the
maybe
way-
this is like on a completely different tack of we get a trace ID.
Yeah, I think about it. There is the actual fetch matches call. Each fetch matches call has a context ID that the synchronizer has assigned to it before that call was made. So that's a correlation that actually is common for all the matches generated by a match function run.
But we want to like kind of shard that up. No, I don't know.
No, what I'm saying is there is a blob of information here, which is like, hey, what match profile was this match? What match function was this? What was the synchronizer context for this match? And potentially a unique ID, which are all kind of a blob that essentially OpenMatch can tack onto the match, which you don't get a chance to update. It's like,
It's the profile context.
yeah.
Great.
So there would be a name that you can still choose, but That's just if you want to
It's
populate.
like an origin information,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Where did this match come from?
Yeah.
What's its lineage?
Yeah.
But the match profile and the activation of the function needs that initial correlation, which I think is the thing we're trying to address here.
Sorry, say that again.
The profile. The profile makes matches.
Profile turns into matches, yes.
Matches have a sort of lineage, but they're not set, so we need to figure out how to set them.
Yes.
Yeah, we should either require the user to set them, or we should forbid the user from setting them and set them ourselves. Probably. Because then they don't have to make a choice about like,
I think
Uh,
the forbid is tricky, but I think it's more like the understanding then is like, hey, don't set this because it's going to be ordered in there.
Any lineage that is like director created should be optional, I think.
Yeah.
It's the main takeaways. Like if there's a name that's gonna be flowed through, it comes in with a profile, and when it gets to the match lineage, it's just a profile metadata name that gets tacked on. Right now, I think we actually do something really gross where we actually copy the profile into every match object and return that at the back door. Because we ended up using that for storing session information. But like the director could totally just do that if we actually had the correlation. The problem is right now we do a run and we get back a list of matches, and like we lost our context that's actually useful for doing things like we put in the session to do backfill because we have the initial query information. Yeah. So, well, man, I was just reflecting on this whole project the other day. It's come a long ways.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Yeah. Cool.
My focus for .9 is hopefully we should kind of get to a point where you folks can actually get on board and
We're gonna do the due diligence on 8 and get us souped up. I had already done this a couple months ago on .6, and then Starley went and just like did it for 8. So we still have to dig into that. He's regretting how much he said he got done already. But yeah, the both of us just this sprint have just a bunch of integration stuff. So I'm hoping that we can start. I have a feeling some of the things we talked about are going to come out in the wash on that one, especially around IDs and correlation and the profile context and the assignment. Just some of the extension stuff that I know we haven't integrated with that we've introduced. So it all felt good. So I hopefully it is going to continue to feel good. Perfect. Cool. Out of time.
that's it. Out of time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Charlie, I will talk to you later. I'm curious. We should get time to schedule a run through of our stuff for